I don't do resolutions. That is, ones that are actually real. Conversationally, I'll play along, but resolutions aren't part of who I am. I do what I must, act in the way that I think I should. That is not defined by what others think I should or should not do. I never consider myself to be a nice person. I don't mean that I'm mean, but if it matters, I tell the truth. Depending on the circumstances, I will do so gently, or if I must, lay down a line not to be crossed, such as acting in a safe manner. If it doesn't matter, such as Aunt Bee's new hat, if she likes it, it's beautiful because it makes her more beautiful and it shows in her whole being. I define beautiful as in spirit and how it radiates outwards. Even the ugliest face, physically, is more beautiful when joy radiates from it. I have dined with kings and paupers with dirt floors. I prefer the paupers every time. Why? I am given their highest honors, even if it's only boiled beans and sourdough bread. It is a feast in my eyes, where the king will offer poor quality food that looks fancy but seldom surpasses the quality of a TV dinner. The king might feel an obligatory necessity having me as the guest. The pauper feels it is a privilege having me eating at the table. Now let me give my feelings about this example. With the king, I deserve better, much, much better. With a pauper, I do not deserve such honors. It humbles me, much like the wayward son returning to his father after wasting his inheritance found in Luke 15:11 of the Bible. It is the sharing, not of time, but of the heart that feeds me. I base my response on what is correct and true. Correct meaning the proper answer, not propriety. I sometimes state that I'm a perfect person. Most will think I'm bragging. I'm not. It is based upon the less common usage of someone trying to be perfect. In this sense, I am perfect. Based upon fact, I am not perfect by a very large margin. But maybe tomorrow I will be more perfect. It is a journey, not a destination. A few years ago, Mrs. Old Farmer and I went to a local farmer's market and stood in line to buy some apples from a farmer who had a group protesting against them. There was a protester standing next to where you paid for your purchases with a sign that protested against the farmer. I turned to the protester and said, "I do not agree with your position, but I don't have a problem with you quietly standing here with your sign making your statement. So thank you for doing so peacefully." I didn't acknowledge that earlier the protesters were creating a nuisance to drive away business from the farmer, but I had a chance to give a positive recognition to someone while not acknowledging I knew that earlier they actually should have been arrested. To be honest, standing this close was intended to be an intimidation, but my speaking quietly, but loud enough so that others heard, kept those in line from starting trouble with the protester and eliminated any intimidation with those standing in line. I was given a quiet nod by the farmer who knew what I was doing. I used to follow the news to the level that I could have anchored the local news on TV if I didn't break the camera beforehand. Now I'm not following it at all, with the exception of trying to stay informed enough to know what is happening. At this point, Russia and the Ukraine are clashing. I know that it's happening. I don't need to know anything more except there is a chance that it could become a global war. There is nothing I can do except to prepare for broken supply lines and possibly influence upon the dollar. I'll know if things break out. Until then, I ignore the news. I have a president in the White House that is in reality someone who's part of the Walking Dead. His administration is doing more damage than Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama have combined. This is not politics. This is talking about harm to this country and its citizens. Politics is completely different. As an example, Jimmy Carter has done more good in the world with Habitat for Humanity. He has done many things that have strengthened this country, and with Habitat has been a good ambassador. However, Mr. Carter should never have been president. He will be remembered fondly for his work he has done for Habitat for Humanity. Thank you, Mr. Carter, for your unselfish work. If we look at the United States presidential line of succession, I don't think we have ever been in a situation where if we were talking about competency, not politics, we may be looking at an empty well with those who are in line to succeed the current president. And besides the vice president, the rest of the presidential line would be acting as president, not actually holding the office. Besides current events, this alone puts us into troubling times. I would say this is also true here in Michigan. There is very little difference between what we see at the federal level and here at the state level. A very empty well indeed. We as a people have allowed processes to be put into place that drove most or all of the decent people from serving an elected office. And if that didn't work, then every effort was made to corrupt them. Only until we get down to the local level do we see competency in elected officials. Luckily, the way our Constitution is set up, probably the most powerful group of elected officials we have are our sheriffs. And on the whole, no matter which party they come from, most are pretty good and decent people who can step in if need be and protect the citizens from crimes of theft and violence, and from those trying to steal our freedoms. I'm talking about those who will stand up and say no to the governor and even the federal government, if need be. And yes, they can still call out a posse if warranted. So next election for sheriff, make sure you know who you are voting for and why. It may be the most important vote you make. I'm concerned about is how much worse will things have to be before we see states seceding from the Union. Most folks will call the last secession the Civil War. This is not what it was. The term the South or the Confederate States used was the correct term, the war between the states. Why? The Confederate States constitutionally could secede. They had formed a national government with elected officials, and the Confederacy was recognized by the countries of the world. It was not a civil war, but a war between two legitimate countries, such as when in 1812 the United States invaded Canada, trying to capture Quebec, Canada. Being that Quebec was a province of Canada and Canada was part of the British Empire, Great Britain came and handed us our hiney on a plate. So what will happen this time if we have states secede from the Union? If these states form a legitimate government, just as with the Confederacy, will the Union allow it to stand? Or will there be another war between the states? Knowing the actual history is so vitally important to the well-being of any and every country that we must bring back the true history of our country, not this pablum of worthless information that means nothing to distract those who wish to learn our true history. For example, the war between the states was vitally important to the slaves of the South. That's not open to debate. It was. Slavery was actually the most minor part of these events. If the South hadn't the dire need to prepare for war, the South would have eliminated slavery on its own. The Southern leaders knew slavery would destroy the South, but could not even think of changing the economy when there was a possibility of a war with the North. So it is a little-known fact that the leaders of the South wanted to eliminate slavery, and by my guess only, would have done so quicker than what was actually accomplished and without the loss of blood and destruction. Without the South being bankrupt, there would have been the ability to help the freed slaves without the rancor of being the symbol of defeat for the South. It would not have been perfect by any means, but much better than what actually happened. As for the North, free the slaves was nothing more than our hearing, "Let's go, Brandon." It was a rallying cry because it was hard to get the North to back a war against the South. So free the slaves and its many variants was shouted about to bring the North together to fight the South. And it almost didn't work, because many in the North was looking at the government side of things and thought it was a pretty good idea. So what happened was an invading force stole the slaves from the landowners. The South put up with it, but they didn't have to like it. Where if the South had eliminated slavery themselves, the reaction towards the blacks would have been more in line with how Great Britain interacted with blacks after they were freed on August 28, 1883. Again, not perfect, but better than what happened among the states. Were relations perfect? No, of course not. But there was more of an acceptance of blacks in Britain instead of a walking symbol of defeat. So the South showed their hatred of losing the war on the one thing that rubbed salt into the wounds of defeat: the freed slaves, all of them. The North had strong negatives against blacks because they felt they were forced by Lincoln to go to war with the South to free the slaves, which cost the North so much blood. This kind of hatred will last for generations. President Lyndon B. Johnson forced through the Civil Rights Act in 1964 with his Great Society. Anyone with enough sense to butter toast knew we had enough laws on the books to eliminate the injustices against blacks if the laws were only enforced. So companies and businesses were forced to do something they would not do: promote unqualified blacks to positions they could not handle and let them fail. The Civil Rights Act was a failure that reopened scars of 100 years ago. If we had only enforced the laws on the books, made available advanced training and education to bring anyone and everyone to a better position and then let them compete fairly, making sure blacks were treated equally, the scars of the past would not have been ripped open with the claws of politics, instead of allowing decency to reign. Blacks have so much to contribute if they were not unjustly pushed into the faces of whites. Everything about the Civil Rights Act was designed to inflame and debase blacks. The politics of pretending to help unfortunate blacks with financial support destroyed the black family, a group of people who were known for being involved with their extended families and were an excellent example to the rest of us with the importance of that extended family. Now blacks are just the opposite, in too many instances, from broken nuclear families. The whites hate the blacks, and the blacks hate the whites. But if we brought in ambassadors from black countries, seldom were their biases brought against them. Often they were treated with respect and with equality, closer to what the American blacks deserve to have earned. This is the important part: earned by due process. From all the blacks that I knew who benefited from Johnson's Civil Rights Act, only 3 I respected and treasured as friends or looked to as mentors. These 3 people saw a door open for them and hooked a plow to their butts and learned what they needed to do the job. And in doing so, earned the respect of their community, black and whites together. So when I see what is going on today, I am depressed to see our leaders increase the wedges between people who, if they actually knew one another, would probably like each other, and in some cases, have respect for one another to varying degrees. These are not pretty words I have spoken, but maybe some will hear them and understand that just as the Republicans and Democrats are purposely putting each of us at our own throats within the various races, are doing the same thing among the various races in our country. Instead of helping to bring everyone up, these politicians are trying to destroy our country for their own gain, and then they have the gall to blame us. these are my thoughts. An old man saying things that are not good, and hope that some will see this as a cry to step past the crap and once again become neighbors. Well, this is the old farmer Scott Bain. Be well. Be safe.